Hey Madison, how you doing?
Hey Richard, good morning. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Good to see you again. It's been a while since we last spoke. I think maybe even a year or two.
I know, yeah, it's been a minute. How have you been?
Yeah, good. Whereabouts in the world are you at the moment?
I am on the beautiful Pacific coast of Vancouver Island.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I think last time we spoke, you guys were looking at the Middle East market.
And we still are. Lo and behold, we closed our first investment, and it happens to be from the Middle East just last week.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We had to spend a long time doing things like research and development and
Yeah,
growing the team and getting the word out. And now we're finally on this wonderful trajectory.
good. Good. Well, looking forward to getting stuck into that. I guess for now, thanks for joining the podcast today. Looking forward to speaking with you. If you could kick our listeners off with talking us through the early days of Madison, where you started in life, your early career in Canada and at ESA, I believe, and how that journey kind of navigated through to today and becoming CEO of Space Copy.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when I think about everything in general, like how we dove into Space Copy, how I founded it, how it became the company that it is today, I am really absolutely astounded. I mean, I spent 6 years at NASA. I spent about a year at ESA. My capacities in those organizations had a lot to do with dual use technologies and also looking for forward thinking technologies. So at NASA, it was very much planetary science focused. At ESA, it was very much astrophysics focused. I did a bit of astrophysics work at NASA as well, but at ESA, it was more like data analysis and astrophysics and just tried to read between the lines and dive deeper into certain aspects of technology that hadn't been heavily researched. And I think that that mission really came home when starting Space Copy, because although 3D printing is something that's become quite commonplace, you see it a lot in the manufacturing industry, you see it a lot in even in aerospace, but it's still relatively novel in a lot of different aspects, and we haven't
Yeah,
figured out the facets of how it works entirely.
good, good, fantastic. And what does Space Copy do? How do you guys fit into the space ecosystem? I know you mentioned there about 3D printing. Where could you talk us through what you guys do and what you're planning to do and kind of how you see, especially now with your funding round, where you kind of see the company going and evolving over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, really fun for me now because
Yeah,
originally I had been part of the problem of figuring out how to survive. And now we've stepped into the part where we're thinking about how to thrive and how to grow and scale.
yeah,
And it's a really exciting transition when you're going from startup to company. That said, Space Copy itself, we characterize as an in situ logistics and additive manufacturing company. We have bases in the United States, that's where our headquarters is, but we also have a research base in Canada as well, and two joint venture projects in Europe, one in France and one in Poland. We are building out 3D printing technology that is capable of manufacturing in extreme environments, both on Earth and in space. So, working in combat zones and natural disaster areas here on Earth to provide infrastructure to remote communities and people that need it the most. And then in parallel, working in orbital and planetary ecosystems ranging from lunar and then even scaling back down to cislunar and Leo, being able to work in those kind of just like really austere environments. And moreover, being able to do so without needing kind of external supply chains. We utilize the local resources, your lunar regolith, your scrap metal from dead satellites that are floating and creating space debris, and then on Earth, the same kind of message carries scrap metal, soil, sand, so that you're not having to rely on the outside. You're providing infrastructure and repair parts and precision tools to the end user based entirely on what they have in front of them.
that's incredible. And what's the difference between what the 3D printing system you guys are creating in terms of what you're actually manufacturing and building on Earth and in space? What are the differences between the products or the infrastructure that's being 3D printed for the Earth case and then the space case?
That's quite the catalog.
Yeah,
Terrestrially versus space, I don't tend to think that there's a huge amount of differentiation. It's a lot of the process that I think is what differentiates compared to the actual end product. Everything from base plates for semiconductors, precision tools, repair parts, especially for things like military applications. There's legacy equipment, so things that are no longer manufactured. Something breaks down, it takes you months to try and get a repair part for it because it's just not standard. We create anything that is of small to medium scale, so anything that's up to 1 cubic meter in print volume. Berms and trusses are still within that list, so we can go quite big. Interlocking bricks and tiles that can be used from anything from habitation to roadways and launch pads. And even textiles is something that we've been getting a little bit more involved in on the research side, and just figuring out how we can use the lunar resources to turn it into something that's radiation proof as well, that could be used as a shielding material, either for habitats or astronaut spacesuits. It's a very, very long list. And I'm going to come back to kind of your original question, which I half answered, which was, now that we have established ourselves a company, I've explained a little bit about what we do. Now, what are we doing? We're moving quite globally. Is we're taking all of this research and development that we spent over the past few years and commercializing it. And that's not just for aerospace. It works in tandem with aviation and defense, but also with construction, mining, energy, and oil and gas. Being able to 3D print valves and gaskets and components for pipelines, for example, or support structures for battery cell systems that are going into those really extreme environments. These are all of the things that we're looking at. And when you talk about use case and when you talk about differentiation between Earth and space, it really comes down to exactly that end user and what are they looking for? Are they looking to replace an O-ring? Or are they looking to fix a pipe that's running through a desert? Or are they looking to have some kind of bearing that gets fixated to a satellite? It really just depends on what that user is requiring, and we adapt ourselves around that.
Amazing. That sounds incredible. I didn't realize how much different use cases and dual use technology and applications that you had. That's very impressive. And in terms of, I guess, from the space exploration side as like a general industry, where do you see, with all these dual use technologies, 3D printing, everything else, where do you see the kind of the future of space exploration evolving, and where do you see space copy playing a part in that evolution?
Oh, the evolution is so diverse. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to predict it even 5 years ago, myself going into this niche and this facet of the industry, much less it growing to the capacity that it has, not just as a company, but as an industry. I think that the message, if you were to ask anybody in the space industry this, the message would echo, it's a really, really difficult time to work in space. Moreover, to work as a small business that collaborates with government, especially that we're US based and just kind of North American centric. I have my opinions about how different ecosystems work currently versus how they should work. And it's not even necessarily up to the people that are in those administrative positions. These are things that go higher. They go into federal governments and they get interwoven with different scientific versus economic versus governance programs. And it's definitely very challenging. I say the same about Canada. I say the same about any of the EU countries that we operate in. Things are bureaucratic, and that has put us at a standstill where we have to now justify the research and the use case in order for it to make sense, to get funding, to get that early validation. Then you have the opposite side of this, which is the private capital side, right? You have plenty of private equity investment that's been flooded into space over the past 5 years. That said, it's not 2021 anymore. People are not willing to cut a check for anything. You need to have more validation now in 2025 than you've ever had to. People are not investing in new technologies as much. They're very much adverse. There are reasons for being so, and I completely understand and find justice in many of those reasons, but it also presents a really big challenge when you are in manufacturing and hardware and aerospace and all of those things combined together. So from my side of the equation, I think what I'm seeing as a trend is that we're investing, I'd say, in equal parts upstream and downstream. And it depends on how you want to look at it. And you have to be from a niche sector to really understand how it behaves. There's folks that invest solely in satellite technologies. And because of that, we've grown constellations worth that have helped us power our communication systems globally. And that's fantastic. They're starting to become a little bit more recognition. I mean, in space manufacturing as a marketplace is set to be worth a market of 7.5 billion per annum in 5 years
Yeah.
from now. So it's something that's not small. It's not the largest thing in juxtaposition to the rest of the space market, but it's something that I think people are recognizing is important. And the only hesitation point from my side is seeing that people still have an understanding that this kind of technology is still in some ways ahead of its time. We don't have astronauts on the surface of the moon that's going to be operating this equipment yet.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of rephrase this as how can we make this, autonomous so that it can serve active robotics missions and active lander systems that are being deployed to the surface currently. How can we rework the problem to also work in orbital conditions where there is a lot of current space activity and where there is still actually a legitimate need for it? And then third, how can we split this into a dual use focus so that there's a current marketplace so that from a commercial standpoint, we can stand to generate revenue? So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I'm seeing all these different patterns going into the space economy and into the way that we approach business. And this is kind of the route that we've had to observe and now had to diversify our capacity in what markets that we really utilize our tech in.
Yeah, it's all incredibly exciting, isn't it? As I say, in terms of all that future growth and the growth now around in space manufacturing and finding those engineers to do these things and build the autonomous robotics or whatever it is. One of the reasons why we kind of launched this podcast was to try and make space accessible for everyone. And I think in terms of the kind of sustainability of like future talent to do these amazing things and be a part of these amazing missions like Space Copy, is to try and encourage that kind of next generation, because it's not really getting any easier to actually find the talent to do these amazing things, but there is still that kind of concept. I still get it now when I speak to friends and family. As soon as I mention about space, that straight away it's astronauts, it's astrophysicists is the assumption. So
Yep.
what do you feel we could be doing at kind of like a STEM school, college, even an elementary age level to try and encourage and make space more accessible for everyone in the future talent?
You absolutely asked the right person this question.
Yeah.
From my personal standpoint, my background is not in STEM. I don't have an engineering degree yet. Anyways,
Yeah.
I might decide that I want to pursue a technical degree, but as of right now, my background is in international business and commerce and entrepreneurship, which played very well into the career path that I needed. My workforce training in planetary science and astrophysics and data science and heliophysics, this I learned when I was, going to work for NASA, going to work for ESA, and all of the different volunteer positions and sub. These are all things that I had to learn and not in the traditional sense. So I believe that there's a very, very important place for having standard, common threads of education that have to do with STEM and especially space science that we should start to work into our curriculums, even from just a general perspective. You don't have to dive into it unless you want to go into a nuanced degree that specializes in it. But I think even just a general understanding from an early age about the importance of space and how that plays into life here on Earth is a really important message to bring back. So what we're doing right now, we are in the very early stages of crafting an education course at Space Copy that's going to teach users more about 3D printing and space in general and just general space technologies. And that will be a 2026 project. But what I've been doing personally is I do a lot of mentorship. So, for example, I've collaborated with Lab of Future to provide STEM education workshops to children between the ages of 6 and 14. So we're teaching them from a very, very early age. And stepping into those digital workshops, and like there's 100, 200 of these young kids. And I'm talking about space, and I'm sitting there wondering to myself, am I diving into it too complex of a subject matter for that type of audience? And we got to the Q&A point. There's this little 6-year-old child asking me about whether or not 3D printing is different when you don't have any gravity in space. And I'm sitting there just
Wow.
trying to really connect those dots. I'm like, wow, these kids are intelligent. They want to dive
Yeah.
into this subject matter. We need to make sure that this kind of education is commonplace in schools. So there's the workshop side of it, and you can empower that outside of schools, which I think is super, super amazing. You know, put your kids in a summer camp where at least one of the daily activities has to do with space. Um, but then there's also the opportunities you're stepping into like an older, broader audience. Two other associations that I have worked with in the past, the first and most recent being the Cosmic Girls Foundation, that's targeted more towards young women that are in high school and university trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And we sit down and we talk about different space technologies and how you can have a career in space, even if you're not following a traditional background. For example, you can go into law, you can go into policy, you can go into business and still have a science-related career. And then last but not least, I do mentorship for a university in Canada. It's called Concordia University. And these are students that are in their early to mid 20s.
Mm.
And I just coming from a non-traditional STEM background and then having such a career in space sciences and then having the opportunity to talk about what that journey was like and ask other students from a varying different range of ages. So like from 6 years old to 25 years old, how do you see this industry? How do you see its technology? What fascinates you? What are the things that you hope to achieve? And some people do answer the traditional thing like, I want to be a physicist or I want to be an
Yeah.
astronaut. But some people say, you know, I want to be on the marketing team of the next biggest rocket launch company. And I want to be able to tell people and spread the word about what this place does because it's so meaningful to me. So I get so many varied answers. And at the end of the day, what it comes back to is education and knowledge and communication. You have to be able to be ambitious enough to reach out, to be able to research, to be able to figure out what exactly you want. And then when you're doing so, you have to have the support community around you to help you figure out what exactly that is. And we can only do that by training each other, by communicating with each other, and by spreading that knowledge. And that's something that is deeply, deeply personal to me.
Yeah, that's incredible to hear. And one of the consistent themes I've noticed by doing this podcast is the power of mentorship and doing all the things that you're doing. So that's amazing to hear. One of my questions was actually going to be, I mean, you've kind of already answered it, but it's how do you just keeping on that kind of theme of that younger generation, because I think I agree with you, mentorship is such a powerful thing, and it's amazing that
Mhm.
you're actually leading from the front on that. I think a lot of the young generation, I think maybe they don't even know how, like, where to start in terms of identifying a mentor. So and also I think that the importance of that mentorship, it also can kind of be seasonal as well, right? It can change through different parts of your life, different parts of your career. So what's your kind of thoughts on like the importance of mentorship, and what kind of advice would you give in terms of like where to start with it and identifying the right mentor for the correct part of your career and life at that time?
Absolutely. And I can answer this as a mentor, but I really want
Yeah,
to answer this as somebody who's been mentored. And I was even chatting this morning with one of my most trusted advisors at Space Copy, that I sit down with every single week and talk to about every single problem and challenge under the sun and how to
yeah,
navigate it and how to go about it. And he's seen quite a bit since the very inception of the company. Um, I think it depends on what background you're coming in from. If you're a student, you can often find mentorship coming from your academic community. And then again, I'm going to come back to the message of communicating and reaching out and building a network. You can build that network through events and clubs and even LinkedIn. You can build out the network that you want and you can find mentorship in the funniest of places. Um, but as a startup founder, we went through, I think, 7 accelerators and incubators over the course of 3 years. And we did everything from Techstars to an incubator program from Singapore, Singapore Management University. We did the Engine by MIT. We did Creative Destruction Lab. These are all forums where mentorship is the name of the game. That is the value add that you get from going into those programs. And as somebody that had absolutely no idea how to work in entrepreneurship and how to work in space in conjunction with each other, like there's being an employee of NASA, and then there is starting a company and trying to commercialize 3D printing on the moon. That's a whole other different subject matter. And looking at it from that lens, I didn't know all of the things that were really, really required here. And mentorship for me has been the very fundamental thing that I've had to latch onto in order to gain an understanding, and more so as a solo founder as well. And even a solo female founder, if you want to break it down into an even smaller niche. Working in this industry is not always kind, it's not always forgiving, and you need to be able to rattle off your ideas to somebody that you trust and respect and who has that same respect for you, to be able to figure out what are you doing, what's the next step, what's the next thing that you need to achieve the goal. I'm lucky that I found mentors that really understand from a deep perspective in what I'm talking about. They've been either entrepreneurs or they've been in the space industry for decades or both. And a lot of the conversations that we wrap ourselves around is, how do we fix this problem? How do we fix this challenge? I don't know how to pursue a solution to this. And mentors for me have been people that will listen, that will offer advice that's tangible. And in the face of a challenge where they feel like they can't offer advice or they don't know enough to, they will refer me out to another person in their network that knows something about this that could help. And that's something I really value. So when you're sitting down having a conversation with someone, are they listening to you? Are they providing something that you feel is tangible to the problem that you have at this current moment in time? And if by some chance they have absolutely no idea how to deal with something you're going through, do they know somebody that might be able to help you? And again, accelerators and incubators are good at doing that by training, but working with individual people and making those relationships last beyond the standardized program, beyond standardized academic constraint too, if it's somebody that's coming from academia and your student, and then finding a way to build off of that network and connect with more people that are within that person circle that you can build from and build from. My personal experience is that some of our mentors have introduced us to people that are now our clients, or have introduced us to people that are now very good friends that we can go to for advice or just to listen and figure out, is there a very, very obvious solution to something that's staring me right in the face? And that is my, again, very long-winded answer to how I approach mentorship, both as a mentor and as somebody who's actively mentored every day.
No, I think that you summed that perfectly, and I think having that external sounding board is absolutely crucial, because, like you say, when you're kind of in it and it's your business, sometimes you can. I mean, you just said it there around, like, is there an obvious solution to this? Sometimes when you're just like head down, you're running at something, and it's your business and you're in it, it's hard sometimes to see the wood from the trees, and having that external sounding board and come in and say, hey, why don't you try this? So no, I completely agree. And keeping on that theme as well, and I don't think this is just the younger generation, but I think a lot of people just in general on social media, kind of social media for me is a bit kind of like, can be, look at the highlight reel a lot of my successes. They don't see all of those failures and the lessons and the grind and all the kind of stuff that you go through behind that to kind of get to a point where you are, you know, successful and whatever. So what would you say at this point in your career so far has been like the biggest lessons you've learned?
We'd have to have a 3-hour-long podcast to get into that. I think that it's very, very multifaceted, and I can name you off several very specific instances where I had to learn lessons as a person and as an entrepreneur. But the main theme of every single one of those instances comes down to trust, either building trust or trusting the wrong people. And that carries just as much in business as it does in life. There were choices that I look back on where I say to there something that I could have done better? Could I have noticed a sign in a business relationship that said that it wasn't going to work out from the early onset? And then I proceeded to invest months of time into nurturing those relationships only for them to crumble. And this is something that a lot of startup founders have to go through, and a lot of people in general in this industry and so many others, but especially in tech. We really have to go through the ringer to figure out who are our people, who is the tribe that we can count on at the end of the day. And I started this company with people that are no longer part of that picture. And I mean that both internally and externally, people that were part of the project, people that were standing by and watching the project that I'd go to for advice. Those relationships just didn't work for the
Yeah.
long term. And it's a matter of having to accept that, having to be adaptable to that, having to understand that at a certain point, you can give it your effort, your time, your energy, and those relationships are not going to nurture and curate the way that you would have expected them to. And it's okay, because it's not the end of the business. It's not the end of the personal journey. It is one of many different things that have to be cast out to you as a lifeline to say, you know what, maybe this isn't going to work out the way that you had originally intended it, but keep going, keep running towards what you want. And regardless of what that challenge is that you're facing, if it's maybe even a technical thing that goes wrong, or maybe it's a business thing that goes wrong, or it's an interpersonal thing that goes wrong. You have to be able to trust your instincts. You have to be able to move forward and not get stuck and stagnant over something that didn't work. And you have to be able to use those lessons to keep being smarter and keep growing. And that is something that I learned numerous times very early, and I'm a much, much better person for it.
Good. Fantastic. And I think, yeah, totally agree. And you mentioned something there, tribe. As you start to grow Space Copy and you move on now your funding, and whether or not it's you're hiring in the US or Canada or Europe, what does, with all those lessons that you just mentioned, with all those lessons you've learned around dealing with certain people, both internally and externally, what does a good workplace culture look like to you now? What are, like, do you think, the core ingredients to kind of pull that team together in your and Space Copy's vision?
I find it so funny because for the longest time, I probably didn't know how to answer that question. But with the
Yeah.
current team that we have such a really diverse team. And I mean that just solely in their backgrounds too, because they're coming from so many different knowledge bases. Some are technical, some are business. Some of them are both business and technical. And we have a very intimately small but very, very meaningful team as well. And it's to the point where we've built up the culture with each other where we feel okay enough to sit around in a circle and sing kumbaya when we found the answer to something that we've been
Yeah.
searching for a long time. Recently, we were closing in on some capital fundraising, and a couple members of our team were not available to be on the call. They were handling other things for us at the moment. We run an international internship program as well. We have 50 students that are with us for the summertime, and sometimes you can't have everybody in the same call at the same time. So there's half of us that are in the investor fundraising call. There's the other half of us that are dealing with the intern problems. And the conversation with that investment team, it went really, really well. We hung up the line. I did my little happy dance. Our chief strategy officer called up our lead engineer, and they both absolutely started screaming with joy. And they told me this story yesterday in our last team meeting. And I'm sitting there listening to this and seeing the absolute joy on everybody's faces as they talk
Yeah.
about the things that they worked through together and the joy that they felt when a really good conversation happened with an external party, or even just the challenging things as well, like having to explain the same thing over to a customer or to an intern in order to get them to understand what the task at hand is, and working through that frustration together. But I've been in teams where people are not putting in their equal weight. I've been
Yeah.
in teams where people are creating conflicts with each other. And right now, what we have at Space Copy is a very emotionally intelligent and mature team, and you need that from a very fundamental perspective. And I think about workplace culture and what I have built and what I want to continue to build as being very, very strict in that regard. You have to be able to build people into what you're creating. It is not going to be an overnight sensation that you're going to wake up and you're going to suddenly understand what it takes to put 3D printers in space. So there's a very big technology hurdle that you have to be able to get across that threshold. But moreover, and what's going to really help you survive in the long term is being able to mesh with the other people of that organization. See them as a family, see them as people that you can rely on and count on, and you can text them in the middle of the night. They don't have to respond at that hour, but you can text them in the middle of the night and say, hey, I've got this idea, or I saw this resource, or this might help the project that you were working on, and then coming together every week at those team meetings and seeing how can we help build off of each other. So that's something that we've built. It's something that I want to continue to expand on. And as we grow, it's going to be more difficult to have that kind of intimate relationship if we start having a staff that's, 50 people or 100 people. But in the meantime, with the very small team that we have, it's this lovely camaraderie that we've built. And in keeping with that framework and keeping with that enmeshment and wanting to make that momentum go forward, the best way that I know how is to be open, to be honest, to be as down to earth as humanly possible, and to make sure that there is a great deal of trust that's built in from the early onset.
Amazing. Thank you. This podcast has been amazing. Thank you ever so much for your time. I feel like I could talk to you all day. I think the final question from me, I think taking all of those lessons and all of the information you've had, if you could distill that down into one single piece of advice, and the hope is that there is another Madison somewhere listening to this who has a similar background to yourself, business background, and they're looking at you and thinking, this is like the catalyst for me. Like maybe I've been, that person has been looking at space and thinking it is all rocket scientists and it is all astrophysicists. What would you say to that person as one single advice outside looking in that really wants to get into space tech this year?
Amazing question. And Richard, you've had the pleasure of seeing us grow from a very, very early day. And from that very early day compared to right now, I feel like I have so much more nuance to be able to answer a question like that. When I look at space tech compared to what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I've been in the industry for 8 years, for context, so it was a very different place even when I entered it. I didn't have even 10% of the knowledge when I entered it compared to right now, and for that I'm extremely grateful. It is a place to learn and a place to build, and I think that you might look at space and you think of it as extremely rigid. It's a boys' club, or it's an engineers' club, or a physicists' club. That's not true. It's absolutely not true. We're having more diversity. We're having more opportunities now than we ever have. There are so many facets to working in space tech that are non-traditional, that are becoming the new norm. You can go into just about any education degree, and you can come out with a career in space if you want to curate it that way. And I think what the principle here is regardless of what your background is, regardless of what you want to do, there is a certain network building that necessitates working in this industry. I built my network through having the opportunity to work for some government agencies, but also by joining consortiums and attending conferences and trade shows. And I always try and promote that to people when they're starting their careers in space, is get out there and go to an event. There are plenty of free ones. There's plenty of local events that are probably not too far away from where you live. And that means every major city in the world, and some of the smaller ones too. There's events that happen constantly. If you want a career in space tech, you have to put in that effort and build it. I'm not saying that it's an easy one-stop shop, and you're not necessarily going to land on your perfect go every single time. But I think that there is such an openness and an acceptance from the community to want to recruit more people into understanding this big and
Yeah.
beautiful ecosystem that we work in. That if you have that mindset and that power that you want to build a career in space, and you get out there and you start talking about it, you say, I want to build a career in space. I'm going to start targeting my LinkedIn. I'm going to go to a conference. I'm going to join the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium, which is something that you should be doing if you want to go into something that's deeply technical for space.
Yeah.
Um, these are all forums and communities that are free to be part of. You don't have to do anything except show up and be yourself and talk about what you want to do and find ways to match yourself up to what's already going on. What it comes down to is building that network, building that education,
Yeah.
and just having the courage to start. And I had that courage to start. And it has been the most fulfilling thing that I've done in my life. And I can't imagine a career that would be anything different than what I'm building right now.
Amazing. Brilliant. Madison, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. Really, really appreciate your time. Yeah, this has been amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm gonna send this episode over to my marketing team. It should get done over the next couple of days, and I'll send you the final version. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. It's been great to speak to you today, and hope you have a fantastic week ahead.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Great to see you. Great to reconnect. If you need anything else from me prior to release, just give me a shout. In the meantime, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day today.
Thank you. Thanks, Madison. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.